The divorce papers felt like ice against my fingertips as I stared at James's signature, still wet with ink. 3 years of marriage reduced to a legal document that he'd signed without even looking at me. I was sitting in that sterile hospital bed, my head wrapped in bandages, machines beeping around me like a countdown to the end of everything I thought I knew. "Jennifer, you need to understand," James said, his voice flat and emotionless as he adjusted his expensive watch. "The doctors say your memory might never fully return. I can't spend my life with someone who doesn't even remember our wedding day." He paused, glancing at his phone. "Madison is waiting for me downstairs. We're going to announce our engagement next week." Madison, my younger sister, the same sister who had been texting him constantly during my 3-month coma, the same sister who had convinced him that my amnesia was God's way of giving him a fresh start. I watched him pack his belongings from the small table beside my bed, his cologne, his reading glasses, the photo of us from our honeymoon that he casually tossed in the trash. "James," I whispered, my voice hoarse from weeks of silence, "I know I can't remember everything, but I remember loving you. Doesn't that count for anything?" He finally looked at me then, his dark eyes cold as winter. "Love isn't enough when you can't even remember why you fell in love in the first place. Madison and I, we have history, real history, not the fragments and confusion you're dealing with." The irony was suffocating. Madison had history with him, all right. She'd been sleeping with my husband for 2 years, even before my accident, but my damaged brain couldn't piece together the evidence I'd been gathering. Couldn't remember the private investigator's photos hidden in my jewelry box. Couldn't recall the confrontation I'd planned for the day I ended up in that hospital bed. That night, alone in the darkness of my hospital room, something shifted. The steady beeping of the heart monitor seemed to slow, then stop altogether. The room filled with an ethereal silence, and suddenly I was standing outside my own body, watching the medical team rush in. But instead of panic, I felt clarity. I was dying, and in that moment between life and death, everything came flooding back. The private investigator's manila envelope. Photos of James and Madison in hotels, in restaurants, in our own home while I was at work. Text messages planning their future together. Bank statements showing James systematically draining our joint accounts. Madison's pregnancy test, positive, hidden in her purse during our last family dinner. Their plan to have me declared mentally incompetent after the accident, to take control of my family's construction business that I had inherited from my father. Most devastating of all, I remembered the fight. The night of my accident, I had confronted James with everything. He'd been cold, calculated, admitting to it all without a trace of remorse. "Jennifer, you were never supposed to find out like this. But since you have, you should know, Madison and I are in love, real love, not the convenient arrangement our marriage became." I'd stormed out of the house in my car, tears blinding me as I drove through the rain. The last thing I remembered was the truck running the red light, the screech of brakes, the world turning upside down. But here's what I didn't know until that moment between life and death. The truck driver had been drinking at Madison's favourite bar. The same bar where she'd met him 2 hours earlier, where she'd brought him round after round while telling him about her sister, who just wouldn't give up her claim on the man Madison truly loved. The accident wasn't random. It was orchestrated. The heart monitor's shrill alarm pierced through my revelation, and suddenly I was gasping, pulled back into my broken body. The medical team stabilized me, declaring it a miracle that I'd survived what appeared to be cardiac arrest. But I knew the truth. I'd been given a second chance, and this time I remembered everything. For the next 2 weeks, I played the perfect amnesiac patient. I pretended to struggle with basic memories, asked confused questions about my life, and most importantly, I never once mentioned what I now knew about James and Madison's betrayal. When they visited together, Madison playing the devoted sister, James the reluctant but dutiful husband. I watched them with new eyes. "Jenny, sweetie," Madison cooed, stroking my hair with the same hands that had traced James's chest in our marriage bed. "The doctors say you're improving every day. Soon you'll be able to come home, and James and I will take such good care of you." James nodded, his performance flawless. "We've been talking, and we think it might be best if you stayed with Madison for a while, just until you're fully recovered." I smiled sweetly, the same innocent smile I'd perfected over the past 2 weeks. "That sounds wonderful. You two have been so kind to me." Inside, I was calculating. They thought they had me exactly where they wanted me, vulnerable, dependent, and completely unaware of their scheme. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed my amnesia had erased my intelligence, along with my memories. The morning I was discharged, I had already set my plan in motion. While they thought I was napping, I'd been making phone calls. Lawyer calls, bank calls, calls to my father's old business partners who had been waiting 3 years for me to take a more active role in the company. "James," I said as he helped me into the wheelchair, "I've been thinking about what you said, about us not having a future together." His face brightened with relief. "Jennifer, I'm so glad you understand. I was worried about how to tell you." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my voice still soft and confused sounding. "I think we should make it official. The divorce, I mean. I don't want to hold you back from your happiness with Madison." Madison squeezed my shoulder, barely suppressing her triumph. "Sweetie, are you sure? That's such a big decision." "I'm sure," I said, meeting James's eyes in the rearview mirror as he drove us to Madison's apartment. "In fact, I already signed the papers yesterday. My lawyer said it would be easier while everything is still fresh in whatever memories I have left." The car swerved slightly as James processed this information. You signed them? Already?" "Don't worry, I made sure you got everything you wanted. The house, the cars, even my share of the joint accounts. I just want to start fresh, with whatever life I can build from these scattered pieces." What I didn't tell them was that I transferred everything of real value to accounts they didn't know existed, signed the construction company over to a trust that would protect it from any future claims. And most importantly, I'd recorded every conversation we'd had since I woke up, including their detailed discussions about my incompetence and their plans for my future. As we pulled into Madison's driveway, I saw her exchange a look with James in the mirror. Pure, unadulterated greed. They thought that they'd won the lottery. They had no idea that the real Jennifer, the one who remembered everything, who had evidence of their affair, their embezzlement, and their attempted murder, was about to destroy them both. But first, I had to play one more scene in their little drama. The helpless, grateful victim who was so thankful for their generosity in caring for her. "Madison," I said as James carried my small bag to the front door, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned, her face a mask of sisterly concern. "What is it, sweetie?" I leaned close, my voice barely a whisper. I may not remember everything about my old life, but I remember how much I've always loved you, how much I've always trusted you. Madison's eyes filled with crocodile tears. "Oh, Jenny, I love you too. So much." James appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. For a moment, he looked exactly like the man I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. Handsome, confident, seemingly devoted. But I knew better now. And in exactly 72 hours, when my lawyer finished executing the final phase of my plan, they would both discover that the amnesia patient they'd been playing had been playing them right back. The only difference was, I was better at it. "Thank you both," I said, allowing Madison to help me out of the car. "For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." James smiled, already pulling out his phone to text someone. "Probably his real estate agent about listing our house, or his bank about accessing our accounts. Let him try. Let them both try. Tomorrow morning, they would wake up to a very different world than the one they were expecting, and I would finally get the justice that my broken, trusting heart had been denied. But tonight, I would sleep in my sister's guest room, playing the Grateful Invalid one last time. After all, every good revenge story needed a perfect setup. Madison's guest room smelled like the lavender perfume she'd started wearing after stealing my husband. I lay in the narrow bed, listening to her and James celebrate in the kitchen below. Their voices carried through the thin floors, giddy with their apparent victory. "Can you believe how easy that was?" Madison giggled. "She practically handed us everything on a silver platter. God, I almost feel bad for her." "Don't." James's voice was sharp. She would have figured it out eventually. The amnesia was a gift. Now we can finally be together without all the messy complications. I pressed my ear closer to the floor. They thought I was heavily sedated from the pain medication Dr. Harrison had prescribed. What they didn't know was that I'd been spitting out every pill for the past week, building up a collection that would serve a very different purpose. "When do you think we should announce the engagement?" Madison asked. "I mean, officially." "Give it a month. Let the divorce finalise. Let Jennifer get settled into whatever pathetic new life she builds. Then we'll have the wedding of the century with her money." Their laughter made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to remain perfectly still. Tomorrow morning, phase 1 of my plan would begin. But tonight, I needed more information. I crept to the bedroom door and opened it just a crack. From here, I could see them at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. My papers. Bank statements, insurance documents, property deeds, everything they thought they now controlled. The construction company alone is worth $12 million, James was saying, running his finger down a financial statement. And that's just the conservative estimate. With Jennifer out of the picture and her father dead, Madison inherits everything as next of kin. What about her Uncle Robert? Doesn't he have some claim to the business? James waved dismissively. Robert signed away his rights years ago when Jennifer's father bought him out. Besides, he's been drinking himself to death in that cabin upstate. Probably won't last another year anyway. My breath caught. Uncle Robert wasn't drinking himself to death. He was in remission from cancer, living quietly in the mountains because he couldn't handle the stress of city life after his treatment. But more importantly, he'd never signed away his rights to anything. My father had set up the company structure specifically to protect it from exactly this kind of situation. James and Madison had been planning this longer and more thoroughly than I'd realised. They weren't just stealing my husband and my money. They were systematically destroying my entire family's legacy. "What about the investigator she hired?" Madison asked suddenly. "Derek something. What if he tries to contact her?" My heart stopped. Derek Morrison. I'd completely forgotten about him in the chaos of my memory recovery. He'd been gathering evidence about their affair for months, and I'd paid him a substantial retainer to dig deeper into James's finances. "Already handled her," James said smugly. "I called him yesterday, told him Jennifer's condition made it impossible for her to continue his services, paid him off, and made him sign an NDA. Cost us $5,000, but it was worth it to keep him quiet." But James had made a crucial error. Derek Morrison was my father's former security chief. He'd known me since I was 16, and he'd never accept a payoff from James without confirming it with me first, which meant Derek was probably already suspicious and digging deeper. I eased the door, closed, and returned to bed, my mind racing. My original plan had been focused on exposing their affair and reclaiming my assets, but this conversation revealed a much larger conspiracy. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd been systematically planning to destroy my entire family for years. The next morning, Madison brought me breakfast in bed, playing the doting sister perfectly. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" You were so quiet last night." "Much better," I said, accepting the tray with shaking hands. "Madison, I've been thinking maybe I should call Uncle Robert, let him know about the divorce, about my condition. He's the only family I have left now." Madison's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "Oh, honey, I don't think that's a good idea. Robert's been struggling lately, drinking heavily. I wouldn't want him to upset you while you're still recovering." "Has he been drinking?" I asked innocently. "I thought he quit after Dad died." "Unfortunately, no. James and I have been trying to help him, but he's become quite hostile toward us. Paranoid, even. He keeps ranting about some conspiracy involving Dad's business." The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly. If I hadn't overheard their conversation last night, I might have believed her. Instead, I nodded sadly. "That's terrible. Maybe I shouldn't contact him right now then?" "I think that's wise," Madison said, relief clear in her voice. "Focus on your recovery first. Everything else can wait." After she left for work at the marketing firm where she'd met James 2 years ago when he hired them to rebrand our construction company, I immediately called Derek from the landline phone in Madison's study. "Morrison Investigations." "Derek, it's Jennifer." A long pause. "Jennifer, Jesus, how are you? I heard about the accident, but James said you couldn't wait. Are you calling me yourself?" "Derek, I need you to listen very carefully. James lied to you. I never authorized him to terminate your services, and I need to know everything you found. Can you meet me today?" "Son of a bitch," Derek muttered. I knew something was off about that call. "Yeah, I can meet you. But, Jennifer, if what I've discovered is true, this goes way beyond just an affair." 2 hours later, Derek arrived at the coffee shop 3 blocks from Madison's house. I'd told Madison I was going for a short walk to clear my head. The perfect excuse for someone with supposed memory issues to need some air. Derek looked older than I remembered, his grey hair thinner, his face more lined. But his eyes were sharp as ever as he slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "Jennifer, before you look at this, I need you to understand something. Your accident wasn't random." My hand stilled on the envelope. "What do you mean?" "The truck driver who hit you, Tommy Patterson, he's got a gambling problem, owes money to some very dangerous people. 3 hours before your accident, someone paid his debts in full. Anonymous cash payment, no questions asked." "You think someone paid him to hit me?" "I think someone made sure he'd be drunk and desperate enough to run that red light at exactly the right time. The bar where he was drinking, security cameras were mysteriously malfunctioning that night. The bartender who served him quit the next day and moved out of state." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were photos, financial records, phone transcripts, and bank statements that painted a picture of conspiracy that went back nearly 3 years. "Madison's been embezzling from your family's business since she started dating James," Derek continued. "Small amounts at first, routed through shell companies James set up. But once they started planning to get rid of you permanently, the theft accelerated." "Get rid of me permanently?" Derek's expression was grim. "Jennifer, they took out a life insurance policy on you 18 months ago. $2 million with James as beneficiary. When you survived the accident, they had to adjust their plan." The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the floor. "They tried to kill me. And when that failed, they decided to destroy your mind instead. The amnesia was a gift they never expected, but they adapted quickly. With you declared mentally incompetent, James gains control of everything as your legal guardian." I stared at the photos of my sister and my husband, taken in hotel rooms and restaurants, planning my destruction over romantic dinners. "How much have they stolen?" "So far? About 1.8 million from the business accounts. Plus, they've been forging your signature on loan documents, using the company as collateral. If they succeed in taking full control, they'll leverage everything and disappear with about 15 million total. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt almost detached from it. Like I was reading about someone else's life being systematically destroyed by the people who claimed to love her. Derek, I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep investigating, but I need them to think you've backed off. Can you do that? What are you planning, Jennifer? I met his eyes across the table. I'm planning to give them exactly what they think they want, and then I'm going to watch their world burn. Derek studied my face for a long moment. You're not the same woman who hired me 6 months ago. No, I agreed. I'm not. That woman trusted people. That woman believed in fairness and forgiveness. But that woman is dead. She died in that hospital bed when her heart stopped beating. And who are you now? I smiled, and even I could feel how cold it was. I'm the woman who's going to make them pay for every lie, every theft, every moment they spent planning my destruction. Derek slid another document across the table. Then you'll need this. It's a recording of a conversation between James and Madison from last week. They're planning to have you committed to a long-term care facility once the divorce is final, somewhere remote, where you'll have accidents until you're no longer a problem. I pocketed the recording device without listening to it. I'd heard enough. Derek, tomorrow morning I need you to contact Uncle Robert. Tell him everything. And then I need you to call a press conference for Friday afternoon. A press conference? I'm about to give Madison and James the performance of their lives. But first, I need to make sure they feel completely secure in their victory. People make more mistakes when they think they've already won. As I walked back to Madison's house, the autumn air sharp against my face, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my accident. Power. Not the helpless rage of a victim, but the calculated fury of someone who finally understood exactly how deep the betrayal went. James and Madison thought they'd destroyed the old Jennifer, the trusting wife and sister who would never see their deception coming. They were right. She was gone forever. But what they'd created in her place was something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. And in less than 48 hours, they were going to find out exactly what that meant. Friday morning arrived with an unseasonably warm October sun streaming through Madison's guest room windows. I had spent the previous 2 days playing my role to perfection, the confused, grateful amnesia patient who couldn't even remember how to operate the coffee machine. Meanwhile, James and Madison had grown increasingly bold in their celebrations. They'd already started shopping for wedding venues. I was in the kitchen, deliberately struggling with a piece of toast, when Madison bounced in wearing a designer dress I'd never seen before. The price tag was probably more than most people's monthly salary. "Good morning, sweetie," she chirped, practically glowing. "James is taking me to look at that new development in Riverside today. You know, for our future home." Riverside. The luxury housing project my construction company had been bidding on for 8 months. The same project James had convinced me to submit our lowest possible bid for, claiming we needed to establish goodwill in the community. Now I understood why he'd been so eager to underbid. He'd been planning to award himself the contract all along. "That sounds lovely," I said, letting the toast fall butter side down on the floor. "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm still so clumsy." Madison rushed to clean it up, her maternal act flawless. "Don't worry about it, honey. You're still healing. Dr. Harrison said coordination issues are completely normal." Dr. Harrison, another piece of their puzzle I'd figured out over the past 48 hours. The neurologist who'd been so quick to declare my memory permanently damaged was James's golf partner. The same doctor who'd recommended the specialised care facility they were planning to ship me off to. "Madison," I said hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what you said about Uncle Robert. Maybe I should try calling him, just to hear a familiar voice? Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, sweetie, I don't think that's wise. Robert called yesterday, actually. He was quite upset, ranting about lawyers and investigations. James had to hang up on him. We're worried he might be having some kind of breakdown. Uncle Robert had called, which meant Derek had reached him, and the cavalry was already assembling. But I kept my expression confused and disappointed. That's so sad. Maybe when I'm feeling stronger. Of course, Madison said quickly. When you're stronger. For now, just focus on resting. After she left to meet James, I immediately called Derek from my hidden burner phone. It's Jennifer. How did it go with Robert? Better than expected. He's been suspicious of James for months, apparently. Had his own investigator looking into some irregularities with your father's estate. Jennifer, there's something else. What? Your father's death? Robert doesn't think it was natural causes. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What are you saying? Your father was healthy as a horse, then suddenly had a massive heart attack at 58. No family history, perfect blood pressure, ran marathons. Robert found traces of medication in your father's personal effects that he'd never been prescribed. The room started spinning. They killed my father too? We can't prove it yet, but the timeline fits. Your father dies unexpectedly, you inherit everything, then you conveniently have an accident before you can discover the financial irregularities. It's a long-term plan, Jennifer. Years in the making. I sank into Madison's expensive leather chair, the same chair she'd bought with money stolen from my family's blood and sweat. How many people have they destroyed? That's what we're going to find out at the press conference. Robert's bringing his evidence, I'm bringing mine, and you're bringing the recording of their confession. But, Jennifer, are you sure you're ready for this? Once we go public, there's no going back. I thought about my father, who'd built his company from nothing, working 18-hour days to create something lasting for his family. I thought about Uncle Robert, grieving alone in the mountains while they spread lies about his drinking. I thought about myself, lying broken in that hospital bed while they celebrated their victory. Derek, I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The press conference is at 3:00. Channel 7, Channel 12, and the Herald Tribune all confirmed they'll be there. Plus, I've got someone from the district attorney's office coming unofficially. Perfect. And Derek, make sure James and Madison know about it. I want them there. Jennifer, that's risky. If they know what's coming. They won't know what's coming because they think I'm a brain-damaged victim who can barely tie her shoes. Trust me, they'll show up thinking they're going to watch me humiliate myself in public. After hanging up, I spent the next hour carefully applying makeup to make myself look pale and confused. I messed up my hair, put my sweater on backward, and practiced stumbling slightly when I walked. When Madison returned home around noon, flushed with excitement from her house hunting expedition, she found me exactly where she'd left me. How was your morning, sweetie? She asked, not really listening as she scrolled through photos on her phone. Quiet, I said. Madison, there's something I need to tell you. A man called earlier, said he was a reporter. He said there was going to be some kind of news conference about Daddy's company, and they wanted to interview me? Madison's head snapped up so fast I thought she might get whiplash. A reporter? What did you tell him? I said I didn't understand, that I couldn't remember anything about the company, but he seemed very insistent. He said I should come to some building downtown at 3:00 today. Jennifer, you are absolutely not going to any press conference. You're in no condition to speak to reporters. They'll take advantage of your confusion. But what if it's important? What if Uncle Robert arranged it? Madison was already dialing James's number. James, we have a problem. Some reporter contacted Jennifer about a press conference. Yes, today. I don't know, but we need to control this situation. I listened to her side of the conversation, watching her panic build. This was even better than I'd hoped. They thought they were walking into damage control, not their own destruction. James is coming over, Madison said, hanging up. We're going to that press conference together, as a family. I'll do all the talking and you just stay quiet, okay? Let me handle everything. Okay, I said meekly. I trust you. 2 hours later, we walked into the downtown press room together. Madison held my arm protectively, playing the devoted sister taking care of her brain-damaged sibling. James followed behind us, his expression grim but confident. They thought they were about to handle an annoying obstacle. Instead, they were walking into their own funeral. The room was packed. More reporters than Derek had promised, plus several faces I didn't recognize who looked like law enforcement. And there, in the back row, was Uncle Robert. He looked older and thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp with fury as they locked onto James. Derek stood at the podium, setting up a laptop and audio equipment. When he saw us enter, he gave me the slightest nod. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek began, thank you for coming. Today, we're here to discuss a conspiracy that spans 3 years and involves theft, fraud, and attempted murder. Madison's grip on my arm tightened. What is this about? She whispered. I looked up at her with wide, confused eyes. I don't know, maybe it's about Daddy's company. We're here because Jennifer Walker, the woman you see here today, has been the victim of an elaborate plot orchestrated by the 2 people she trusted most. Her husband, James Walker, and her sister, Madison Chen. The name hit me like a physical blow. Madison Chen. Not Madison Walker, our family name. Chen was the name of our mother's first husband, Madison's biological father, who'd abandoned them both when Madison was 5. She'd taken back his name after our mother died, claiming she wanted to honour her heritage. But now I realised the truth. She'd been planning this betrayal for so long that she'd legally distanced herself from our family name before she destroyed it. James stood up abruptly. This is outrageous. My wife suffered severe brain trauma and is clearly being manipulated by someone with an agenda. Sit down, Mr. Walker, Derek said calmly, because what we're about to reveal will interest you greatly. The first audio recording began to play. James and Madison's voices filled the room, discussing the insurance policy, the planned commitment to the care facility, and their timeline for stealing the company assets. Madison's face went white. James started moving toward the exit, but 2 men in suits, the law enforcement Derek had mentioned, blocked his path. Furthermore, Derek continued, we have evidence that the recent car accident that left Mrs. Walker with amnesia was not accidental. The truck driver, Tommy Patterson, was paid to be at that intersection at that specific time. The second recording played. This one was newer. A conversation Derek had recorded yesterday when he'd confronted Tommy Patterson with the evidence. The man had broken down completely, confessing to being paid to create an accident, but claiming he never meant for anyone to die. As the damning evidence mounted, I watched James and Madison's faces transform from confusion to shock to absolute terror. They kept looking at me, trying to understand how their brain-damaged victim was sitting calmly while their world collapsed around them. That's when I decided it was time to drop the final bomb. I stood up slowly, letting go of Madison's arm. When I spoke, my voice was clear and strong, with no trace of the confusion I'd been performing for weeks. Hello, James. Hello, Madison. Surprise. The silence in the room was deafening. Madison's mouth fell open. James stumbled backward as if I'd physically struck him. You see, I continued, addressing the room full of reporters, my amnesia was never permanent. I remembered everything 3 weeks ago. Every lie, every theft, every moment you spent planning my death. Madison found her voice first, her perfect mask finally slipping. You manipulative bitch! You've been pretending this whole time. The same way you've been pretending to love me while you stole my life." I smiled, and several reporters actually flinched at the coldness in it. "The difference is, I'm better at acting than you are." James was staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. Which, in a way, he was. The trusting woman he'd married was dead. What stood before him now was something else entirely. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning back to the cameras, "let me tell you exactly how my husband and sister tried to murder me for money. And then, let me tell you what I'm going to do about it." The room erupted in camera flashes and shouted questions. But all I could see were James and Madison's faces, watching their perfect plan crumble into ash. The hunt was over. Now came the kill. The courtroom was packed 6 months later when the verdicts were read. James received 25 to life for conspiracy to commit murder and embezzlement. Madison got 15 years for fraud and accessory to attempted murder. The truck driver, Tommy Patterson, had already pled guilty and received 10 years in exchange for his testimony. But as I sat in the front row, watching my former husband and sister being led away in shackles, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure. Because the real revenge hadn't happened in that courtroom. It had happened in the weeks immediately following the press conference. The day after their arrest, I'd made a very interesting discovery while cleaning out Madison's apartment. Hidden behind a false wall in her closet was a fireproof safe containing documents that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. Birth certificates, medical records, adoption papers. Madison wasn't my half-sister. She was my twin. My mother had given birth to twins 28 years ago, but only brought one baby home from the hospital. The second baby, Madison, had been given to a family named Chen, with my mother's promise that she would never tell anyone about the twin sister who'd been born with complications. The complications? Madison had been born with a rare genetic condition that would require expensive medical treatment for life. My mother, overwhelmed with debt and already struggling to raise one child alone, had made the impossible choice to keep the healthy twin and give away the sick one. Madison had discovered this truth when she was 18 and had spent the next decade planning her revenge, not just against me, but against our mother, our father who'd never known she existed, and the entire family that had abandoned her. Every moment of our friendship, every sisterly bond I'd thought we shared, had been calculated manipulation. She'd approached me in college not as a long-lost relative seeking connection, but as an enemy infiltrating my life to destroy it from within. The affair with James, the embezzlement, even my father's murder, it had all been part of her elaborate plan to take everything that should have been rightfully hers as the firstborn twin. But here's what Madison hadn't counted on. I was smarter than she'd ever imagined. While she and James rotted in their separate prison cells, I'd been busy implementing the final phase of my own plan. The phase I'd never told Derek about, never mentioned to Uncle Robert, never revealed to anyone. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's becoming them. I'd used the 6 months between their arrest and trial to systematically take over every aspect of Madison's carefully constructed identity. Her social media accounts, her professional connections, her entire network of friends and acquaintances who'd never known she had a twin sister. The beauty of Madison's deception was that she'd created this perfect life using stolen money and false pretenses. All I had to do was slip into her place and make it legitimate. I moved into her apartment, took over her lease, even accepted the job promotion at her marketing firm that she'd been expecting before her arrest. To the outside world, Madison Chen had simply gotten a dramatic new haircut and started wearing different clothes after the traumatic experience of discovering her sister's husband was a murderer. But the real masterpiece was what I did with James. 3 weeks after his sentencing, I visited him in prison. He'd aged a decade in 6 months, his confident swagger replaced by the hollow look of a broken man. When the guard brought him to the visitors' room, he actually smiled when he saw me. "Jennifer," he said, sitting down across from me at the metal table, "I knew you'd come. I knew you still loved me despite everything." I let him hold my hand through the bars, let him think he was seeing forgiveness in my eyes. "James," I said softly, "I need you to know something." "Anything," he breathed. "I'm so sorry, baby. I never meant for it to go so far. Madison, she was obsessed with destroying you. She threatened to hurt you if I didn't go along with her plans." The lies came so easily to him even now. Even after being caught red-handed, he was still trying to manipulate me. "I know," I said, squeezing his hand. "I figured it out. Madison was sick, James. She was jealous of me, of us. She used you." Hope flared in his eyes. "You understand? You know I never wanted to hurt you." "Of course I know that." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "In fact, I have a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" I pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on the table between us. "I've been documenting everything Madison did to manipulate you. All the evidence of how she coerced you into the affair, how she threatened your life if you didn't help her steal from my family." James's eyes widened. "You're going to help me appeal the conviction?" "Better than that," I said, pressing play on the recorder. James's own voice filled the small visitor's room, crystal clear and undeniably him. "Jennifer's too trusting, too naive. She actually thinks I love her. It'll be easy to drain the company accounts before she notices anything missing. And once she's gone, Madison and I can live like royalty on her family's money." The colour drained from his face. How did you... I recorded every conversation we had during my amnesia, James. Every cruel word, every cold calculation, every moment you thought you were talking to a brain-damaged woman who couldn't understand what you were really saying. His hand jerked away from mine like I was made of fire. "You're insane." "Am I? Or am I just finally playing the game by your rules?" I stood up, smoothing down my dress. Madison's dress, actually, tailored to fit my body perfectly. "See, James, you thought you were so smart using my amnesia against me. But you never considered that maybe I was using it against you." "What are you talking about?" "I never had amnesia, James. Not real amnesia. The doctors were right. My memory should have returned within days of the accident. But I realised I could use everyone's expectations to my advantage, so I pretended to be confused and helpless while I gathered evidence of your crimes." James gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "That's impossible. You couldn't have been faking it for months." "Couldn't I? I'm an excellent actress, James. I had to be, to survive being married to you." I leaned down until my face was inches from his. "Did you really think the trusting little wife you manipulated for 3 years didn't have any secrets of her own?" "You're lying." "Am I?" "Then explain how I knew about the shell companies you set up 2 years before my accident. Explain how I knew about the insurance policy you took out on my life. Explain how I knew Madison was embezzling long before I hired Derek." The truth was slowly sinking in, and I watched with fascination as James realised he'd been outplayed from the very beginning. "You see, James, I've always been smarter than you. I just let you think you were in control because it served my purposes. But the accident gave me the perfect opportunity to stop pretending and start planning." James's voice was barely a whisper. "You set us up. I gave you enough rope to hang yourselves with. All I had to do was play the victim while you and Madison revealed the full extent of your conspiracy. Thank you, by the way, for confessing to my father's murder on tape. That really sealed the deal." I gathered my purse and started to leave, then turned back for one final twist of the knife. "Oh, and James, I have one more surprise for you." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. It displayed a marriage certificate dated just 2 weeks ago. I married Derek Morrison yesterday, the same private investigator who helped expose your crimes. He's always been in love with me, you know. Even when I was married to you, he was waiting patiently for his chance. James stared at the certificate like it was written in a foreign language. We're very happy together, I continued. We live in Madison's old apartment now, run the construction company together, and Derek's even adopted Madison's dog. It's amazing how easy it was to just step into her life and make it better. You're a monster, James whispered. No, I said, walking toward the exit. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. As the guard buzzed me out of the visitor's room, I heard James calling my name, his voice cracking with desperation. But I didn't look back. After all, Jennifer Walker was dead. She died in that hospital bed, trusting and naive and weak. The woman walking out of that prison was someone else entirely. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to get justice is to become the very thing that destroyed you in the first place. And as I drove home to Derek, my new husband, my true partner, the man who'd seen through James's lies from the beginning, I finally felt the peace that had eluded me since the accident. Not because I destroyed my enemies, but because I discovered that the best revenge wasn't taking their lives. It was taking their places. Madison Chen lived in a beautiful apartment, had a successful career, and was deeply in love with a good man who would never betray her. She just happened to be me now. And James would spend the next 25 years in a cage, knowing that somewhere in the world I was living the life he'd tried to steal, with the happiness he'd tried to destroy. The only difference was, I'd earned it. After all, I was always better at playing the long game than they ever realized.